Here, on a quiet, unassuming country lane in Cheshire, stands an ancient well named after the Anglo-Saxon St Plegmund, who was to become the Archbishop of Canterbury in 890 AD. Why was a well dug here and dedicated to St Plegmund, and what significance does it hold in the Cheshire countryside? Welcome to History Walks. But who was Plegmund, and what part did he play in Anglo-Saxon Britain? A Mercian by birth, Plegmund lived as a hermit on a raised area where St Peter's Church stands today. Surrounded by marshes, it was known as the Isle of Chester. He lived his life as an emirate monk for many years until 890 AD, before finally being summoned by a young King Alfred the Great to his court. Alfred had wanted Plegmund to take an active role in the great work that he planned, that of promoting learning across his kingdom. In 890 AD, King Alfred insisted that Plegmund be made the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he was duly consecrated in Rome. In the year 908, Plegmund consecrated the new minster at Winchester for King Edward the Elder. However, by August 923, Plegmund had died. The well that we see here today was during medieval times used for christenings. Known to the locals as the christening well, it consisted of a stone-lined pit with 2 steps leading down into a sink on the south side. Restored in 1907, an inscribed plinth was added around the top. However, this has since disappeared. St Peter's is a church built of red sandstone with a roof of Welsh slate. Much of what we see today dates back to the 15th century, except for the church tower added in 1826. However, it's believed that the original church that stood here was constructed as early as the 12th century. As we travel along the path from the west tower heading east, we come across this beautiful porch added to the 15th century church during the 16th century. Now if we take a closer look here, we can see grooves cut into the stonework at both sides of the porch. The reason? To insert timbers to stop the surrounding cattle from wandering into the church. Much of the 15th century church that we see here today was funded by the Trafford family, a family well known across the area. Now the churchyard here at St Peter's in Plemstall is fairly typically laid out, as are other churches across Cheshire. However, this one holds a real surprise. It's here at the east end of the church where we come across this stunning vault of the Hurlstone family. Consisting of an ashlar sandstone anchorless plinth mounted with a carved Baroque tomb chest, it's one of the strangest layouts I've ever seen in any Cheshire churchyard to date. Dated to 1670, it certainly has many unusual features. Here we can see the carved recumbent skeletons. The one here on the south face is that of a male, whilst on the north side the carving represents a female. Note the arrow and palm leaves held here by the male skeleton, whilst we can see that the female is holding a spear and an hourglass. Whilst the original construction date of this vault can be dated accurately to 1670 AD, the vault also contains other family members. Here, attached to the back of the east wall, stands a plaque in memory of a very special person and dated to 1727. Although today much of the inscription remains washed away due to the weather conditions over hundreds of years, we're lucky that Ormerod recorded the inscription in his book A History of Cheshire in 1819. It reads: "In this vault lies the body of Elizabeth, wife of Charles Hurston of Newton Esquire, youngest daughter and co-heir of Thomas Lander of Newhall in the county of Lancaster." It goes on to read, "Elizabeth, daughter of Edward Downes of Shrigley in the county of Chester. She was beautiful in her person, distinct in her behaviour, dutiful daughter in her observance. A happy mother, she died on the 19th of November 1727, aged just 32. So many gravestones here record the passing of many people. However, the gravestones from the 18th and 19th century tell a tragic story of the loss of so many children. Young lives that would have probably been so much longer and so much more fulfilled had it been down to them having the modern medicines that we have today. As with all new episodes of History Walks for our third series, not only do we get to go around these wonderful churchyards and see the archaic and the ancient tombstones, but we now also have the ability to go into each church to take a look at the architecture and the treasures that still remain to this day. There's no doubt that churches themselves are time capsules from history that remain intact to this day. Well, today is no exception, and I'm grateful to the Reverend Heather Carty for allowing us permission to go inside St Peter's to take a look around. As we enter the church, I'm immediately drawn to this stunning medieval roofing of a hammered beam design. You can see that both gables are divided into two bays. It was between 1907 and 1946 that Reverend Toogood decided to make it his life's work to redo all the woodwork within the church. These included the font cover, much of the carving in the chancel, as well as the baptistry screen. He achieved all of this work as rector over almost 40 years here at Plemstall. Plemstall was once a rectory in the gift of the monastery of St Peter and St Paul at Shrewsbury. Later, it was to pass into the possession of the College of St John at Chester. It's here at the west end of St Peter's that we find the bell tower, built in the year 1826. It replaced an earlier wooden bell cot, with the bell tower that stands today being inscribed with the church warden's names being that of Thomas Gerard and William Pritchard. Now I'm up here in the tower that was constructed in 1826, and we find 3 bronze bells hanging, all dated and inscribed. The first bell reads, "God save our church," and dated to 1635. The second bell reads, "God save the King," and dated to 1663. And the third bell reads, "Gloria and Excelsis Deo," 1663. Now the 2 bells that are dated to 1663 were cast by John Scott of Wigan. However, he couldn't have cast the earlier bell because he didn't start casting until 1637. It's clear to see that these 3 ancient bells have not been rung for many years. Indeed, looking at the condition of the ropes and pulleys, I would suggest probably not since the late 19th century. Now these bells may have been cast almost 400 years ago, but they still have a beautiful tone.
Te lucis ante terminum, rerum creator pascimus, ut solita clementia sis preso.
We're here in the baptistry where we find a gorgeous stone-carved font dated, we think, to the 16th century. It was this font that the Reverend Toogood carved a lovely wooden cover in the portrait of the Madonna and Child. It's here in the north aisle where we find 2 display cabinets holding 5 Bibles, ancient Bibles that were donated by historian Raymond Richards. The Bibles were presented by Raymond in 1945, and it was Raymond who in 1947 published his comprehensive work entitled Old Churches of Cheshire.
Regnat cum Sancto Spiritu.
Now it's true that you can find out a lot of history about the ancient times and the past of the church just by looking at the windows, and St Peter's is certainly no exception. Just look here in these windows. We can see earlier medieval glass that's been reused. Maybe this was a way to preserve what remained of the earlier medieval glass. One of the fragments appears to have been in memory of an unnamed rector of the church who was a doctor of decrees. Well, just take a look at this magnificent churchwarden's pew, dated to 1697. Standing 7 feet tall, it has a panelled back and twisted columns supporting the canopy. For me, this churchwarden's pew fires the imagination to think how many generations have sat here. It's here at the east end of the north aisle that we find the Barnston Chapel that was once known as the Trafford Chapel and the burial place of the Traffords of Bridge Trafford. The Traffords were seated at Bridge Trafford before the time of Edward I, and they assumed that name. It was Thomas Trafford, who passed away in the year 1553, who expressed his wish that he should be buried in Plemstall Church, surrounded by his ancestors. Historically, it's worth noting that the last male of the Trafford family was killed at the Battle of Naseby in 1645. It's here on the north wall of the chapel that we find the family crests of the Trafford, Barnston and Savage families. The history of St Peter's is a great one, a site that no doubt during the 9th century was a hermitage and the home to St Plegmund. Plegmund was an Emorite monk who went on to become the Archbishop of Canterbury in 890 AD. For it was St Plegmund who in AD 900 went on to crown Alfred's son Edward the Elder. This ancient place of worship carries a legacy that has lasted here for over 1200 years and even today remains dedicated to St Peter and the people who today still worship here. I hope that you've enjoyed your visit here today to St Peter's Church here in Plemstall, and I'd like to thank the Reverend Heather Carty for giving us permission to take a look around today. Join me again soon as I take you on another history walk into the past.